in the earth plane, there's entropy, things tend to slow down. But with God's energy, it's just the opposite. Things tend to speed up and extrapolate and become more and more. That's epigenesis. You get that, and then you'll really understand ritual, and you'll really understand sacraments, because that's what those are for. We tap into the potential that exists within the life energy of all things, and we remove the restrictions, you see? So welcome, everybody. Glad to see you here. I'm Michael Maciel. For those of you who are new, I'm an ordained priest in the Holy Order of Mans. It's a Christian mystical order, and I've been doing this for many decades. Teaching and writing. I'm the author of 2 books, World Priest and The 5 Vows, and been working with people off and on for all of this time. So the way this will work tonight, I'm going to read for about 20 minutes, and then I'll open it up for questions. This class is titled Ritual and Understanding Ritual and the Sacraments. It's for anyone on the spiritual path, because rituals and sacraments have been around forever. And I believe there's a lot of misunderstanding about them. But I'm not saying that you don't understand them, but we're going to explore it tonight and go into the mystical aspect of these things, because that's usually what's missing. And all of this material that I present are things that I know through experience, and I'm hoping that my experiences will resonate with yours, and that together we can dive maybe a little deeper into yours and mine, and see what new truths we can discover. These are ancient principles of mysticism and occultism that go back to the dawn of civilization and before. So yes, it's for everyone and anyone, and welcome. So this is about the energy of ritual. The word meditation means moving towards the center. When we meditate, we go within. We withdraw our attention from the world and pull it back into ourselves. We turn away from the world out there. It's something that martial artists, dancers, and athletes of all kinds experience regularly. It's what we are doing energetically when we fold our hands in front of us in prayer. We take the energy that is normally squandered on outer distractions and focus it inwardly, drawing it back into ourselves, forming a tight cocoon of light and power. As we become more and more successful at this, we acquire the ability to turn away from the external world altogether during our meditations. We're able to become oblivious to what's going on around us. Our consciousness becomes a laboratory wherein we can work and pray, which is what laboratory means: labor plus oratory. In effect, we're withdrawing our attention from the world and gathering it into a singular inner focal point. For the ordinary person, withdrawing energy from the world and focusing it within has the sole purpose of transforming one's consciousness. We take something that is ordinarily diffused and we concentrate it into a small space. As we concentrate it, it becomes more potent. If we keep it within ourselves, that potency works on us and changes us, just as fire changes whatever it contacts. But as priests, we take this potential and direct it outwards into an image we've formed in mind. The image is set up on the altar of our imagination. And when I say priest, I mean everyone, our inner priesthood, regardless of whether you've been ordained through through a church or not. This has to do with your own inner contact with God. So we set the image up on the altar of our imagination. It is directly in front of us. And since we have mastered the ability to separate our attention from the outer world of our senses and focus it entirely on the inner field of our awareness, the image before us exists solely in mind, with no interference from external vibrations. We're operating under a cloak, so to speak, in a kind of spiritual clean room. What I'm describing here is the work of an occultist. Normally, such work is only carried out by those who have been carefully trained to do it. Otherwise, these actions are performed through the format of established rituals, such as the sacraments of communion and baptism. But unless we learn to perform simple energy work, such as this, we cannot really perform the sacraments effectively. Therefore, we have to experiment. We have to become totally familiar with how energy works and what it can accomplish. First, by learning how to draw it in and then project it out. Attention is a funny thing. It's only as good as it is grounded. What do I mean by this? When our attention is pulled all over the place, dictated, as it were, by outer circumstances, we have little control of where it goes. When we're in that position, we cannot use the law of mind to create what we want to create, but only recreate what is already going on. In order to use the law effectively and create something new, we have to be able to ignore outer circumstances and visualize only what we want. And we have to embody the thing we're trying to create. If you don't know what the law of mind is, it's the law that says that what our thoughts tend to become reality. So if we dwell on a certain belief, even if we formulate a thought in mind and we focus on it, and we allow that thought to come in and sink down within us into the subconscious, then the tendency through the law of mind action, which is the law of cause and effect on the mental plane, those thoughts tend to come into physical manifestation. Notice I say the word tend because it depends on how clear your signal is and how clear you are in about how willing you are to accept it. And that's not always clear. Many times people ask for things in prayer that they don't really want because they can't actually accept them. They're not willing yet or ready to give up the things in their life that may be blocking the thing that they think they want. So be careful what you ask for because you might get it. So we have to embody the thing that we're trying to create. What does it mean to embody a thing? In spiritual work, you cannot get from point A to point B by going somewhere. A gets to B by becoming B. Unless we embody the essential characteristics of the thing we are trying to create, we cannot bring it into manifestation. This is why, for example, we take on the Lord Jesus Christ when we say communion. This is what priests do at the altar. Unless we become him, we can't say with any effect, "This is my body." Priests practice inner alchemy, and the altar is their workbench. So again, this is for everybody, not just ordained priests, because we all have an inner altar. And we all bring to that altar our offerings to God. And in order to receive from God, something that we ardently desire, we have to take it on. We have to become it. Every element on the altar, the paten or the plate, the chalice, the eternal flame, the candles, the wine and bread, all of these symbolize and embody sacred principles. After all, Christianity is the religion of incarnation. Unless we touch the earth, as Buddha did when he came into enlightenment, and as Jesus did when the blood of his crucifixion entered the ground, nothing changes. Buddha was the awakening of humanity. Christ is its salvation. Right thinking and right action, purified mind and purified heart. The altar itself symbolizes the heart. It is there that we make our sacrifices. The word sacrifice has an alchemical meaning. It means taking one thing and transmuting it into another. In animal sacrifice, the rising smoke of the burnt offering was thought to ascend to heaven, bringing with it the prayers of those making the offering. The body of the animal became a vehicle of communication with the divine. Later, Jesus would embody this form of sacrifice, making his own vehicle, his body and blood, the sacrificial offering, and thus a channel for grace. When he said that we must follow him, he meant that we too must offer our vehicles, our body and blood, as vehicles for God's grace to enter the world. But ours is a living sacrifice, not a literal death. We find our altar within ourselves, and we take one form of energy and transform it into another. We do this not by our own power, but by raising it up to God, just as we raise the elements of wine and bread. The act of physically raising the chalice and paten above the altar symbolizes raising the vibration of the matter of which the elements are composed. We lift them up so that they are closer to heaven, the divine fire that changes everything it touches. The old word for this was quickening. Today, we understand it as increasing its rate of vibration. In order to understand this process, one only needs to find that place within where lower passions are transmuted into noble purpose, anger into resolve, lust into love, greed into generosity. Once that place is identified, we observe the action itself. This is what we play out at the altar. We engage the body, the mind, and the heart in an action that directly corresponds to what we're doing inwardly, which is forming a connection with God and letting the grace pour into us. The physical elements of the wine and bread cannot help but be affected. If we unify the inner with the outer, they will be literally transformed. Their bright vibrational quality will be changed. I'm sure that many of you have experienced receiving a blessing or a healing, and you could really feel it. You could feel your vibration actually change. You knew that something was different. When we work at the altar, that's what we're doing. We're taking physical elements and imbuing them with a higher vibration. The way we get that higher vibration is by lifting up our hearts and our minds to God and providing ourselves, which means our heart, our mind, and our body, as a channel for divine grace to move through. And as that grace comes through, it comes through in the form of energy. That energy is resonant with the energies of physical matter. So just as you can take middle C on a piano keyboard, for instance, and when you strike it, all of the other strings that are tuned to C, both up and down the scale or the keyboard, those C strings will also vibrate because they are resonant with middle C. Just as some people have developed the ability to pick up the vibrations of other people from the objects they have touched, so do the recipients of the transformed elements of the Eucharist pick up the vibrations of the ascended Christ Jesus. Through the mind and body of the priest, her intention, her will, and her spoken word, the Christ infuses itself into the wine and bread, causing it to resonate with the Christ's own blood and body, which now exist above the vibrational plane of the material world. So sometimes, not very often, thank God, you hear people criticize the communion, Christian communion, as some form of cannibalism, as though you get the picture. This is not it at all. We're talking about the ascended Christ, not the physical body. When priests perform the Mass with this understanding, and when they've developed their spiritual consciousness to where they can sense the heaven worlds, then this transmutation can take place. It is an energetic event spanning two worlds, two dimensions, one that can be felt by everyone who participates in it. No amount of explanation, however, can convey the reality of this. Only by practicing it can the reality of the transmutation become part of the reality of the priest and the recipients. The secret of alchemy is that the transmutation takes place within you, not within the external elements, except as they take on the vibration of the heaven world that you contact. The wine and bread become the vehicles for the vibrational quality of the Christ, just as your body and blood become the vehicle for God's grace. Heaven and earth occupy two strata in the world of God. Priests, by their use of ritual and their own developed spiritual consciousness, are the bridge between these two realities. This is what makes the sacrament of communion sacred. There's a saying, where attention goes, energy flows. Taken at face value, it means that what we give life to, whatever we think, it means that we give life to whatever we think about. Simple enough, right? Every marketing person knows that the first thing you have to do to make a sale is get their attention. What they don't know is that as consciousness moves from one object to another, there is a corresponding movement of energy. So, what do we mean by that? Every movement at the altar is choreographed to produce certain effects. Why is the bread on the left and the wine on the right? Why is the body served first and then the blood? Not only does position matter, but sequence matters as well. And I don't mean that it matters semantically or because it was scripted that way. It matters because if you change the position or the sequence, you change the energy. The human body, our body, along with being called our vehicle, is also sometimes referred to as our instrument. We use our body on this plane of manifestation the same way a tradesperson uses his or her tools to effect changes in their materials. We use our body the way they use their tools. What we construct are patterns of energy. We construct these patterns by the way we move, the way we think, and the words we speak. The more integrity our construction has, the more consistent we are in building the pattern. The more power will move through it. This is why we perform the Mass the same way every time. Not that we can't allow room for the Spirit to express itself in new ways occasionally, but the basic structure remains the same. The more we use it, the stronger it gets. And as more people use it, especially at cardinal times of the year, it gets stronger still. So we're talking about priestly rituals and sacraments. And what I'd like you to get is that the rituals that you have in your life, and this is how you practice your inner priesthood, the way you move and speak in the world, and the intention that you bring to your actions, these all have power. And the more you do, the more you perform the rituals in your life and do them consistently, the more you build a pattern in the mind of God. And as that pattern gets clearer and stronger, the purpose and the intent of your action will become more real. And what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish in the world will come. It will manifest. So I'm explaining these things in terms of the priesthood, hoping that you'll be able to identify them in your own life and practice your own inner priesthood. As with most things of an esoteric nature, explanations are never sufficient to get the point across. You have to experience it. So here's something you can try. The next time you're about to raise the chalice, again for priests, but you can take a chalice and do it yourself, to do the transmutation, pause for a moment and look at it while it's sitting there on the altar. Think to yourself, this is wine. Then, as you raise it high above your head and you reach up in consciousness to the Christ being of the sun, which is everywhere, and you feel its energy surround and infuse the cup, look again. What has changed? The wine you raised up is not the wine you set back down. Now, imagine and I want you to try to use this as an analogy for anything. The cup of wine that a priest raises at the altar can be your thought, your desire, your intention to get something done, and you lift it up. We lift things up to God by thinking of God. We think about God as we hold our intention. Just as the chalice holds the wine, your thought holds your intention. And you raise that up just like a priest at the altar, with all of the sacredness and all of the structure of the symbolism. All of this, you embody all of this. You raise up your intention and allow God to change it, to change the nature of the energy that resides in you. Because that's where your intention is, right? You lift up the desire of your heart and you ask God to transform it into something more real than you can even comprehend, that you are even able to embody. In other words, you're seeking to transcend your own limitation, your own limited understanding of what it is you really want. I think this is real enough that you can get it. Now imagine doing this in reverse, not with the wine, of course, but with anything, with your consciousness. What happens when you look up and contact the Christ being first, and then bring it down into something here on the earth plane? Here we have both a difference in direction and in sequence. Therefore, we will have a difference in the energy and the form in which it manifests. Verily I say unto you, whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. What we look upon while in Christ consciousness, we add power to it, the power to solidify or substantiate. But when we first look upon something and then take it to Christ consciousness, we release it from the earth. These are basic alchemical principles. Now, we all have known people, or we know ourselves to sometimes be bound up, that we have a block in us that keeps the energy of life from moving through us. And because of that, we don't experience all of the good things that would naturally come to us simply through God's grace. And so what inner alchemy does is you can take, and you don't know what that is necessarily. You don't know what the problem is. So that's what, I mean, if you knew what the problem is, you could take care of it, right? I mean, it would be obvious. But sometimes things get all bound up inside, and you don't know what or why these things are happening. So you take them and you hold them in the cup of your desire, the cup of your heart, and you raise them up. And then you, with childlike simplicity and full expectation of the reality of God and the ability that God has to change anything that you offer up to him, her, it, doesn't matter, then it will be changed. It will be transformed. And then in the days following that kind of action that you're performing on your own inner altar, you will see the changes start to appear. You'll feel lighter, or things will start to come to you, things that you need or want. Some problem will start to become resolved, all because of this action that you have taken. We do this all the time. Whenever we look at anything with the intention of understanding its true nature, we bring spirit to bear upon it. We isolate it in the mind and cause it to reveal itself as it is. But when we look upon a thing in order to see its potential, we remove the restrictions imposed upon it by the forces of earth and unconceal what it might become. So this is the difference of visualizing something in mind that you want and offering it to God and then expecting it to manifest, right? In contrast to that, you may look at something, and this can be a person, a situation, or even an object. Say you're a potter and you're working with clay. You know what Michelangelo said? He said he took a block of stone and he removed everything that wasn't part of what he wanted to create, right? So what he was doing was he was looking at a block of stone, something immovable, and unorganized, unrealized potential and saw what it could become. This is tapping into the potential of a thing, the potential of a person. This is what is already there, but hasn't been able to break through the inertia of physical matter. And the inertia, it doesn't have to be just matter. The inertia can be of mind. The inertia can be a belief, an assumption, or a fear, or even a desire, an addiction, whatever. You look through the block, through the barrier, through the inertia of the thing, and see what's in there that wants to come out. It wants to come into manifestation. You see the difference in the polarity there. One is coming from the outside, the other is coming out from the inside. Both are valid. You can learn which is appropriate in which situations. These are the fundamental aspects of ritual: raising up and bringing down. The physical actions are, of course, symbolic, but they also set a pattern, just like the wires in a house or nerves in the body. The intention with which you perform the action is the real part, combined with your knowing that your actions are causes that must create effects. This is faith. Everything begins in mind. Change something there, and it must show up here. But you must first know that you can. In neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, we learn the importance of bodily gestures, eye movements, and vocal intonations, and the way these things affect consciousness and behavior. This is not new knowledge, nor is it only based on the way the brain works. The brain works the way it does because it's a reflection of the cosmos. Those who instituted the priesthood and the sacraments knew the reality of as above, so below, and they could read the stars, both in the heavens and in the body. The rituals and sacraments handed down to us work best when they are kept simple. Don't mess with them. If you do, you will only weaken them and yourself in the process. Don't do that.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that there is power and intention which is possessed by everyone by virtue of our humanity. And this power can be focused on objects such as to change their resonance or to change their, to change them somehow.
Say you're a cook or a chef. You're preparing a meal for a group of people. Your intention, your vibration, the words you speak, and how you move, and all of the feeling that you put into it is going to affect that food dramatically. And everyone who partakes of that food will feel it. They'll either say, this is really, really good, or it's just going to be so-so, right?
What are other examples of sacraments aside from the one most familiar to Christians?
Well, another one is baptism, right?
Right. I'm looking for outside the Christian mold and understanding of sacraments.
How about graduation? There you have the conferring upon a person who has put in the work, who has satisfied a program.
Yes.
And they are officially and with ceremony and with power and with meaning and with intention. Here's your diploma. Now go forth and do good in the world.
one feels prompted to ask then, well, what are the sacraments? And I'm saying I expect you're probably not one to want to be listing sacraments like these are
No,
sacraments and these
no,
are not.
no. My
Because
job is to identify and convey the internal structure of these things, the principles involved, so that not just so that you can perform these rituals in an official context, but so that you can use the same principles that a priest uses at the altar in the everything.
Michael, may I speak?
Yes, sir.
I radical here for Nicholas. Sacrament with a chainsaw. Yeah, when having worked with wood for so long, my understanding, my worship of the beauty of wood and the trees that have built this up, so that when you approach a log with a chainsaw, not to break it down into firewood, but to lift it up into a musical instrument, to cut out of the log a piece of wood which can provide something which will make a musical instrument. When you enter the log with the chainsaw, with that intent, with that worship of the log that you have there, it's like lifting up the goblet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Enough
Yes.
said.
You're raising it up to a higher level of
Yes.
meaning, of organization, of
Yes.
realization of potential. So
Yes.
many things happen when you approach it with that intention.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And then you bring down into it the potential to become a musical instrument. And as you keep working that wood, as you keep cutting it and sanding it and drilling it, doing machine processes on it, if
Yes.
you bring that same attitude to it, then it manifests that beauty. And it has gone through a transubstantiation process.
Yes. Yes. And there's sacrifice involved there, because
Yes.
the tree is sacrificing itself to something higher.
Yes.
Now, if you're, I know that some people think, oh, well, no, that's like sacrilegious. It's not, but not to me. To take a tree and turn it into a musical instrument is an act of worship.
Yes.
And I would dare to say, I do say that the tree wants to become the musical instrument. And willing.
I work with trees as well, and they give without demand. When we human beings give, we tend to say, well, you can have that because you're going to do good with it.
Yeah.
But trees give of themselves without making that demand. But so that it's then up to us whether we waste the wood which they have given us through
Right.
their life and the sacrifice of their life, or whether we don't waste it. They don't make that demand. But when we don't waste it, when we do make something beautiful out of it, then the tree is also uplifted by that. The tree feels connected. Yeah. So in the instruments I make, the tree is singing in the instrument because it's made of one continuous piece of wood, not built up out of little bits. The tree is singing in the instrument, and you can hear the difference between an ash tree singing or a walnut tree singing, or you can hear the different nature of the trees in the voice of the instrument.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to steal that, Tobias.
Oh, please do. Just like a tree, I fell it into your yard, and you do what you like with it.
Thank you. So anything that we do, whether it's our job or whether it's our family or just if it's out enjoying nature, it's how you approach it and the intention with which you approach it, and how you open up to the experience. Like if it's your job, you show up and you're there to serve. Usually a job involves serving people in some form. So you show up willing to serve, and you're willing to, and your intention is to break open or to remove the blocks between you and the people that you serve, blocks of communication, maybe blocks of of confrontation or any kind of thing that gets in the way of your intention to make things better, right? So that intention and the actions that intention informs, that is sacramental in nature, because you're bringing to it an opening. You're creating an opening through which the grace of God can move. What we do in these sacraments is we're using symbols. You know, the cup symbolizes something, the plate symbol, the bread, the wine, the candles, the altar cloth, everything symbolizes something that, and not just something, but individual components of a universal cosmic reality. See, each thing in a well-constructed ritual is reflective of things that already exist on the higher level. In other words, archetypal, energetic, things that, you know, the way words are composed of letters, and the letters themselves have meaning as they do in the Hebrew alphabet. You see, we set these things up, we create patterns, and the closer we can match the patterns that we create with the cosmic patterns, the more of an alignment that we can create, then that alignment serves as a channel. It's like lining up your fingers like this, and then you have spaces in between through which energy can run.
Yes.
See?
Yeah.
If it's like this, no, you're blocked. So you realign, and the energy then can move. That's sacramental in nature. And we do it in many different ways.
Mm.
The reason, you know, now we're approaching this from a Christian standpoint because we're talking about Christian sacraments and rituals. But
Mhm.
you know, that's what I know. You know, I don't know Tibetan rituals, but I'm sure that if somebody were to explain to me in detail what they were, what was
Yeah.
going on, that I could see the patterns, and the patterns would be identical. I'd bet anything they would be identical to the patterns that we use in Christianity, because at that level, patterns are patterns. You know, doesn't matter if you're Chinese, American, or South American, Brazilian. If you're an electrician, there are only a set number of patterns that you can make with the wires. Power is going to move if you do it right. If you don't do it right, you're going to burn the house down, right? Ritual is exactly the same way. We're dealing with patterns. Patterns have meaning, and the symbols we use to represent those patterns, they also have meaning, and we create an alignment.
Michael,
Yes, ma'am.
can you speak a little bit to epigenesis with regards to like where everybody is in the world, like lifetime to lifetime,
Well,
Christianity or any other religion, any other belief, any other pattern?
sure. Sure. As we use patterns, as we correctly utilize these patterns, then power moves. And it's not like an electrician where he's doing it out, you know, with wires and wiring a house. We're using patterns within ourselves, and specifically within our physical vehicle. And that physical vehicle has a resonance with the vehicle that is just a higher octave than the physical. So we're creating, as we create patterns in the physical, we create them in this higher level that is us, right? Because we exist on many different levels. So the more power that moves through there, through us, the more momentum is gathered. We start to create a momentum. That's epigenesis. And the momentum we create then has kind of a life of its own. In other words, it's like a flywheel. Once you start a flywheel going and you stop putting energy into it, it's going to keep going for a long time. But the way God's energy works is if you set it in motion, it steadily increases. It's as though you have a flywheel and you push it, and it slowly but surely starts to gain speed, because that's the nature of God's energy. it starts to grow, you see? So that's epigenesis. So you want to be really careful at what you put into motion, because it's going to grow. You know, this is behind the saying, you know, where attention goes, energy flows. You put your attention on something, it's like planting a flower or a plant, you know. You put it in the ground and it starts to unleash the energy inherent within it. That's the nature of our thoughts and our intentions and our feelings. When we put all those together, then what we're doing is we're planting a seed in the mind of God, which then grows of its own. You see, it grows of its own. And once we grasp that, then we're really careful about where we, you know, what seeds we plant. Because it's like did you ever see the movie Fantasia? The Sorcerer's Apprentice? Mickey Mouse, he has a broom and the sorcerer leaves and says, clean up. And so Mickey starts thinking, and he uses some of the sorcerer's magic, and he makes the broom, you know, become two brooms, and then each of those becomes two brooms, and pretty soon he's got so many brooms, they're taking over the world. That's what we're talking about with epigenesis. You see? It's like you make a prayer, and if your prayer is really in alignment and you cause something to come into being, that's not the end of it. It's going to keep growing. You're putting a ball in motion. You're pushing a snowball down a hill, a small one that picks up snow and speed and momentum and you know, all of that as it progresses. So that's epigenesis. In the earth plane, there's entropy, things tend to slow down. But with God's energy, it's just the opposite. Things tend to speed up and extrapolate and become more and more. You get that, and then you'll really understand ritual, and you'll really understand sacraments, because that's what those are for. We tap into the potential that exists within the life energy of all things, and we remove the restrictions. You see?
Could you speak to this? You mentioned it earlier. Careful what you ask for, you just might get it. So, what would speak to what would be effective and useful, the most simple, useful ways, because we're talking about transmuting usually base desires, right? That oftentimes are not, if we actually follow those as our actual will or desire, usually don't, you know, are a little bit melodramatic, right, in the way they unfold. So, in short, what would you say is the best way to go about asking that our desires have wisdom? We need wisdom for what we're asking for, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah, let me say that, you know, sometimes our desires are they're crazy.
right.
So let's take the case of a mass murderer, or any murderer, person who murders somebody else, right?
Yeah.
What are they trying to do? Why are they doing that? And one of the reasons can be, and it's hypothetical, is that they see in the person that they want to kill something in themselves that they want to kill. But because they're crazy, they don't understand that. They think that the thing in themselves that they hate and can't reconcile is in that other person. So they're going to kill that other person, thinking that when they do, they're going to remove that particular evil from the world, and then everything will be better. Now, this is just, you know, one case,
Yeah.
right? One set of parameters. So you can see the good in that. It's just twisted. It's just crazy, you see, because he's projecting it out, right?
Right.
So there's an action that has, if you dig down deep enough, you'll see, okay, the intention was good, but the execution of it was loony, right? Absolutely bonkers, totally insane.
Yes.
So you can take that, by the law of analogy and apply it in anywhere in life, right? You're trying to do something way down in there. The intention is of God. It's a godly intention, but
Right.
somewhere on its way up and out, it gets deformed, right?
Yeah.
Because of our ignorance, right? Because
Yes.
of ignorance. That's
Yes.
the whole thing of Buddhism is the ignorance. Let's get rid of the ignorance, right? So does that answer your question?
No, it does not. So,
Yeah,
so
you only
let
got
me.
one try.
All right. No, it's not that it's not useful. I get that. What I'm saying is something that might be useful so that I guess the prayer could be, just for wisdom with our desire. But
Yeah,
so
no,
so
you're
you
putting the
got
cart before the horse. You're putting the cart
right. So
before the horse.
you've
So
got
when
to stay with
so let me
the.
just break in. So when a
Mhm,
priest brings wine and bread to the altar,
mhm.
he's not bringing the body and blood of Jesus Christ. He's
Okay.
bringing wine and bread, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got something going on inside you and you want to bring it to God with wisdom, you got to bring it, not some camouflaged version of it.
Okay. Got you.
All right. Is that
Okay.
getting
I
closer? Am I
got you.
getting closer?
Yes, you are. You are getting close.
All right. All
So,
right.
yeah, you stay with whatever it is, no matter what, right? You don't project it onto right others. You own it. You
Yeah,
own
you
what it
own it.
is,
You don't try to hide it. You don't try to camouflage it. Right.
right?
I mean,
And
that's the fig leaf.
so, right, and so no matter what your intention of offering that up to God, it then becomes transmuted into a likeness that is closer to the actual root cause or desire, purified and good, the good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, but you don't know what that is. You
Right.
don't know. You don't know.
Right.
Like Nietzsche said, be careful when you throw the devil out. You might be throwing out the best part of you. You
Yes.
don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know
Right.
what that is. And so you come and you're honest. You come to God with, warts and all. You think this is
Yep.
who I am, but my intention is to stand in your presence, right? To stand in the presence. I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever
Okay.
it is, it's going to be, readjusted and aligned and opened up,
Hmm.
so that whatever is blocked in there can move in a way that is that serves you, right? And serves the world,
Okay.
right? It's people like, Jesus, he hung out with some of the worst people, according to society's standards, but at least they knew what the hell they wanted, right? They were unconflicted about that. In Revelation, it says, I would have you either be hot or cold, but if you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out.
Mm.
That's what Jesus went for. He went for the hot or the cold. It didn't matter to him. Just that you're honest about it.
Yeah.
Just be who you are, but be willing to be changed. Live an unconcealed life. Be who you are in the world, and the world will change you. The world will let you know. And that's the whole process. But most people live a hidden life. They don't
Right.
reveal themselves. And people talk about it in terms of vulnerability, and that's really good. But a truly vulnerable person, you do not want to mess with, because they're either hot or they're cold. They're going to burn you or they're going to freeze you. Right? The vulnerability is not well understood in that term. Vulnerability is really being honest, and honesty is, man, that's a two-edged sword.
Mm.
Right? So if anything, just strive to live an honest life and be who you are and be authentic, be genuine, and don't hide.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And good luck.
I have a question.
Yes.
Um, First of all, thank you. I feel like I was interested in this topic because growing up as a Latter-day Saint, I took the sacrament every week and it just didn't do much for me. And then I went to Episcopalian church when my daughter was singing, and I just didn't feel anything living about it. It felt very dead. I had an online communion with the Holy Order of Mans, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is like the real deal. So I appreciate that you and the other priests in the order are doing something that's different. And my question is, if you're doing what I call a dead ritual, where you don't have that living quality of as above, so below, is it harmful? Like, because to me, like, people go to church and like, okay, did that, good to go, you know,
Yeah.
and there wasn't really any sort of inner relationship that I could see happening. Like, if you do that, and you talked about doing this thing over and over and over and over again, it builds up a certain potency. Like, does it
Yeah.
happen if the people are not conscious? Like,
Well,
if people are just doing it in a rote way?
they might not be conscious in terms of this esoteric nature of the sacraments, and they can be performed as ceremonies that are supplemental to something else. You see, it's like it's just a ceremony. But what I've seen of the Mormons that I've come in contact, and for the rest of you who don't know, we're right in the middle of God's country. This is Mormon country. We're in Utah, right in the heart of it. And so I see every time I go into town, they're all around us. And what Mormons do better than anybody else that I've ever seen is community. And they know how to live in community. They know how to support each other. They know how to
Yeah, but they don't know how to take the sacrament. They just like, I think that's just
see
like,
the
I don't know why
community.
we're doing this thing, you know.
Yeah, but see, community is their sacrament. Living community, that's their sacrament.
Do you feel like that ritual of taking the water and bread without consciousness, being kind of bored, wondering, getting on to the more interesting thing, was it a little intellectual discussion with someone or something that feels a little more alive? Do you feel like that hurts somebody's spirituality?
Well,
I think it
if it
does,
were,
but
if it were like in the Catholic Church, I would say yes. But with Mormons, no, I'm willing to give them a pass. Because of what
you like them. You don't know them that well.
I do. I know. I know. I've seen the dark side. Believe me, I know that
Okay,
how
all right.
judgmental they can be. But
Okay, so Catholics showing up to church, taking communion, kind of like without consciousness, just like, okay,
yeah,
I'm supposed to be here.
that's bad, and that's why Catholics don't allow non-Catholics to take the sacraments, because ironically, I mean, and we can't say that all Catholics are like this, because they're not all anybody.
Mormons don't either.
Yeah.
But anyway,
well,
okay, go ahead. I don't want to get
Catholic.
off on all that. I don't want to
Yeah.
get off on all the
Well,
religions.
no, I
I'm
think
just
that's a
trying
good
to
point. You're
have a
making
discussion
good
of dead and living rituals, and is a dead ritual actually hurting your spirituality?
Yeah.
And is that a decent criticism of a lot of organized religions?
Well, again, I would say that with Mormons, it doesn't matter so much, because that's not their focal point. With Catholics, the Catholic religion, and Orthodoxy doesn't seem to have this problem. They have a more of an inner comprehension of the thing. But Catholics can get kind of dead to all of that. But then it really is an error, because the whole thing is built around the sacraments. All of the the way the church is built, the cathedral is built in form of a cross. In the parts of the church all have sacramental meaning. So if you approach the sacraments in a dead way, as you said, then yeah, that's a real problem, because you're just oblivious to the whole thing. Why are you there? You see, I mean, join a club, go to a movie, do something useful. But yes, that can work against you, because the more the more in the Catholic Church, it's built on the reality of the sacraments. So if you mistreat those, or you're disrespectful of those, and yeah, you really shouldn't be there, because those sacraments reflect basic patterns within you, right? With
Oh, yeah,
dealing
that
with,
makes sense.
all the way down
Right.
into the biology of us. Those sacraments have the reality. And when we talk about communion, and either next time or the time after that, we'll go into that. We'll go into the biology of the communion, and
Okay.
it's really quite fascinating. So yeah, if you mess with these outer forms that are so closely resonate with the very core of you, then as you mess with them, you mess with you.
You treat them lightly, you treat yourself lightly.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
think they're not real, then you don't think you're real.
Mm.
And then
Interesting.
you're free to do whatever you want, and then you fall off a cliff, right?
Very much the direction of George Fox and the Quakers and early reformers such as John Huss way back in the 12th century. That direction of also Jean-Pierre de Caussade, the sacrament of the present moment. It's very much that idea that sacraments are found everywhere, and all of life becomes sacramental.
Well, what about desecration?
Well, what about it? It's relative to communities. What's desecration in one community is not a desecration in the other. You already covered that with the Mormon
Yeah, well,
comparison.
yeah, okay, but like, let me refer to what Tobias was so beautifully sharing with us about the way we approach the way a musical instrument maker approaches a tree. That's sacramental in its nature. Contrast that with somebody who doesn't give a damn about trees, who only sees firewood, or who only sees stuff in the way of building a house, you see, and has no feeling or no regard at all for the natural thing, and the meaning and the depth of the whole thing, and just get them out of here, that kind of thing. That's not sacramental.
So
Now,
sacramentality is enhanced by awareness, mindfulness.
oh yeah, that's the whole thing. Yeah. I mean, you can't just do a ritual without consciousness. The consciousness is the lifeblood of a ritual.
Like a magic spell.
Well, I don't know about that, but whatever you do, if you do it with consciousness and with the
the
knowledge.
broader image of magic.
I'm sorry?
I'm talking about the incantational sort of magic, which is sort of a figment of people's imagination. Saying the sacraments, some people treat sacraments like magic. Say the words in just this exact way and it'll happen.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that way. I never
We want to do it right.
have.
Okay, Chris, what do you got? What do you got?
Okay, so I guess a couple of questions. One that's just arisen in the context of what's been said just now. Pursuing this idea of everything potentially being sacramental, of our being able as let's say human in our priestly character as human beings made in the image of God, being able to sacramentalize everything. What then is the distinction? I do think there is one. From your point of view, like, what then is the proper and correct distinction to be made between the sacraments of salvation in the church and the sorts of sacramentalizing deeds that we as priestly people do? So that's question one. And the second question, I think, could tie into it, and that has to do with the role of Holy Scripture in our formation as sacramentalizing persons, and of course as if we're ordained as ordained persons, because the Eucharist isn't just the event at the table. It's the event that forms around word and table, word and altar. And I know that the ritual of the order, the Eucharistic ritual of the order, of course, it incorporates Holy Scripture. So I wonder how what, in terms of, in light of your understanding of sacraments as channels of connection between above and below, how the divine word fits into, like Scripture fits into your view of these things. So I guess it's two, but tackle either one of those. Thanks.
Okay, well, what do you mean by salvation is first part of that.
Well, I'll leave that up to you. I'm just using like kind of conventional language. It's a conventional way of talking about the sacraments,
Yeah.
and that's like, I was formed and ordained within a mainstream tradition and have since departed that, but within that context, the sacraments were the primary sacraments of baptism and Holy Eucharist were there as emblems of the saving deeds of Christ, right? And ways of entering into an experience of the saving deeds of Christ.
Yeah, but that's at the superficial level, right? I mean, that's like at the story level. So what we're getting at is what underlies the story. What does it mean that Christ sacrificed himself for the salvation of the world? We say those words as though we know. And in order to get beneath that, we have to understand the mechanism of it. We have to understand the alchemy of it. We have to understand what salvation means. Is that enlightenment? Is that, rising from the dead? What are we talking about in all of those things? And again, I think when we talk about the communion in subsequent class, that it'll go deeper into where we can actually see the reality of the thing, of how it's connected to the earth, right? Because Christianity is all about being connected to the earth. It's the central column of the Kabbalistic tree of life. It's the one that goes all the way from heaven, all the way down into earth, and it's firmly rooted in both. So this is the wisdom that informs the sacraments. This is what, but in order to really get at those things, we have to delve into those symbols and what they mean and how they connect to reality. So yeah, I know there was more to what you were asking, but.
So any thoughts about Scripture?
Scripture, yeah. So let's think of it very simply in terms of formal speech, right? There's a difference between formal speech and casual speech. When we speak casually with each other, we're loose, we flow with it. But formal speech is defined, and it adheres to action. It adheres to a sequence and an order, a hierarchical order of meaning and precedence, and all of those things come into play. So when we say a prayer, for instance, if we want to do it according to the formal way of praying, then we acknowledge God. We say, God is, you're so great. You look up, you set the pattern. You're reaching up and you're acknowledging your lowly position by kneeling or making yourself vulnerable in some way. These are all deeply embedded biological, instinctual wirings in us. So we enact those, but in a formal way. And formal means there's an algorithm involved. There's a sequence. You do this first, then this, then this, then that. And so that's where, and then our speech is carefully crafted over God knows how long to conform to that formality, so that it has structure, right? It has a form. We're building a form that then becomes a channel. But if there's no form, then the energy just kind of, is diffuse. So we're like scientists working with lasers. How much of laser technology is involved in getting that beam of light really focused? You see, that's the formality of that. With prayer and ritual, it's the same way. In speech, in Scripture, and in the word, the spoken word, all of that is to build the structure. So the more disciplined we are with it, and the more we know what the words mean that we're using, then the more effective we are in forming the form the channel, and then the more energy can move through it.
Thank you. Oh, I didn't thank you for the lecture, because it was really beautiful and really brilliant. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a relief. Well, so somebody, Lida, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to, something that somebody said, and I think it was Eli way back when, brought up something that I wanted to share. And I could share what I learned from it too, which is real short. I was 18 and I was at a youth conference, and one of the guys was looking at his cookie and he suddenly said, "This is my body."
Something clicked.
I don't know what it was. I can't, something clicked all right, first for him, but all of us immediately became part of it. And I remember that so distinctly, almost always been the same, this movement of the spirit there. But that one particular one, there were no ministers, there were no priests, nobody was ordained. But at that moment, something very special happened. What it was what we brought to that moment.
Yeah. Well, the form was there. You had the desire, and that where two or more are gathered, there will I be in the midst of you.
Mhm.
So there was the form, and it happened.
Mhm.
Okay.
But
So
then,
that's
yeah,
an
I
example.
don't think about it all the time, but I never forgot it.
All right. Well, I think we've covered more ground maybe than we should have. It's this, rituals and sacraments, we're getting at the heart of the matter here. We're getting at something that's not just religious, right? We think that rituals and sacraments are created by religions. That's exactly backwards. Rituals and sacraments are something that pre-exist humanity itself. These are real realities. These are patterns. These are cosmic patterns, and that we have discovered. And then religions form around these basic actions that we take. Actions plus intention plus consciousness. All of these combine to bring a level of reality into life that cannot be had if you're just kind of wandering, right? This is all about intention. It's about consciousness. What are you bringing? What are you asking for? What are you allowing? And what are you insisting upon? All of these are factors in the human experience, the human spiritual experience. And that's what the sacraments and rituals are designed to develop in us. Because when we have to go through these motions, we're enacting something. And as we enact it, it awakens something in us. And as that awakens, then we're able to get a sense of what these actions mean and what they do. So that's the whole purpose of this. And if through talking about them in this way can spark that in you and maybe make you look at the actions and your words in your life, with more consciousness, then I'm glad. That's why I do this. So my encouragement to you is to take whatever you do and do it with consciousness, and do it like as though you're planting a seed and you're allowing that seed to grow and to become. That's your every action and your every word, in fact, does that. And conversely, if something is growing that you don't want to be there, because all of this is impersonal, right? These are forces put into motion that can manifest to our betterment or to our detriment. If something arises that it is not serving you, that's getting in the way, that's creating problems, cut it, get rid of it. Use your word, say no, and get rid of it. That's a sacramental action also. That's the cleansing part. You see, so there are two hands. It's not all just roses and flowers and beauty, and No, electricity is not beautiful. Electricity is just electricity. So that's not all that life is, and that's not all that we are. We're not just we're not just biochemical machines, right? We have consciousness, and God is real. And there is such a thing as goodness and beauty and truth. But that's not all there is, right? There are these eddies and conflicts and blockages. And so working with these tools is both to create and to destroy. And by destroy, I don't mean, I'm sure you get what I mean. It's like you want to remodel your kitchen, the old one's got to go. And that involves sledgehammers, a lot of dust, and a lot of dumpsters, right? You go in first and you destroy, and then you clear the slate, and then you create. It's the same in everything. And the sacraments are those patterns. Okay? So in alchemical language, that's was it solve et coagulate? Dissolve or consolidate. These are real actions, and you use these forces, these modes of consciousness all the time anyway. The idea here is to become conscious of them, and as the more conscious you are, the more you allow God to work through you, and then look out, because things will really start to happen.
Mhm.
So with that, I wish you all a good night, and thank you for showing up. So
Oh my
I'm glad
God.
all of you could make it.